Hello everybody, welcome back to the Jeep Journals, and I hope you're having a fantastic day. I know I'm having a pretty great day. I'm able to move about the country at this point in time while basically attempting to relay a story to my viewers and beyond. And that story is that I'm a pretty avid fan, follower, supporter, and observer of wildlife. If you have not got that idea from these videos yet, I strongly encourage you to backtrack and just watch some of the random videos that I have and tell me what you think this channel is about if it's not about wildlife and nature. Wellness and conservation tie in to these subject matters because if we are unwell, we quite possibly will make unwell decisions that will cause detrimental effects to whatever it is that we are safeguarding. And by that, what I mean is, let's just say, for an example, someone is mentally unstable or incapable of compassion because they're sick for whatever reason. Whatever reason. If they're not able to care for themselves, there's a possibility that they may not give as much attention to that which is entrusted to them. Some exceptions will be parents. In a lot of cases, mothers and even fathers will go without so that their own children can persist if that's necessary. The same is true throughout nature. In a lot of ways, the species try to protect themselves and to persevere against all of the insurmountable obstacles that are seemingly, insurmountable. The funny thing is that nature always finds a way. And so I'm not really in a place where I have given up all hope on everything that's going on in the world. Although if you really look at the numbers, there is a great possibility that wildlife and nature in general is in jeopardy. And it's partly in jeopardy because many of us are not paying attention to the wildlife and nature that's around us. In fact, some people don't even look when the light turns green both directions to make sure there's no traffic that was not paying attention to what was going on. In this world where we live in, paying attention is something that we can hardly afford to do without. So, on this channel, I ask you to share, to subscribe, to communicate, basically. And what that does is bring additional visibility to a channel like my own, which is just one of many whose channels have not really taken off because the subject material seems too dense, too challenging to provide any kind of hope or solution to. And nothing could be further from the truth. In this world, I see so many people providing so many different solutions to all kinds of obstacles. And in addition, there are even examples in wildlife where so many of the things that need to be addressed are being called out in ways that are almost unbelievable. Like, for an example, on one particular wildlife show, I saw something along the lines of how an albatross baby, which is a bird, was basically found decomposed as a skeletal system with nothing but contents which primarily consisted of plastic in its belly. And this is because the albatross parents are going on these ridiculously long journeys, perhaps thousands of miles, to get to a place to find their baby's food, and the things that they're finding might not be food itself. And in fact, that's basically what was being told in this story that I'm referencing. Many of you have seen it, and many of you who are listening to this can understand what I'm talking about hopefully you're sharing these videos at the same time so that someone else who can connect with this level of insight can talk these situations through. Because so many times we talk about grassroots efforts and that we need a lot of people to vote to make change, and that, you know, all of this has been ongoing ever since so-and-so time. But not many people are looking at the last 4 years, 5 years of time even, or less, where entire ecosystems of species such as bats, owls, and pollinators of all sorts have been on the decline. So much so that the regularly occurring patterns that we would tend to expect if we were hiking into nature right now, which I do regularly, as you've seen on this channel, as we hike into nature and as the temperatures approach and exceed 70 degrees on a beautiful day like today, where we have warmth, springtime temperatures, and recent precipitation. In a case like this, generally we would also enjoy a magnificent eruption of insects that would occur on a day like today. Now, we're approaching the tail end of our cold season here in San Antonio, and next week I saw that on some days we will be looking at mid-50s and also mid-70s for the high. Today it's going to be in the mid-70s, and actually, let me correct that. Next week it's going to be in the mid-90s. Or actually, I think it said 94 degrees was going to be one of the forecasted highs. Now, the temperature keeps varying every day because, you know, the weather is in such flux that it is nearly nearly impossible actually, to accurately forecast what on Earth is going to happen next. And the reason for that is because there is a climate challenge. Whether you want to admit to climate change, global warming, or any other words that were used to call these things as they are, you may also concurrently admit that there is a global change that's occurring right now. And this change is something that we can only notice if we pay attention. And if we pay attention, we're going to also be very privy to the fact that as we go and walk in nature or around our neighborhoods are kind of it's almost like trick photography. I don't know how to explain it, except for in our neighborhoods, we may not notice as much of a difference because in most of the neighborhoods throughout the country where I'm at, we have regulations where people have to water their yards, keep them in check, make them look good. And because of this, many of the households and businesses that I'm driving past all have sprinkler systems, and those things water the plants regularly. And they have maintenance crews who basically repair any of the shrubbery and floral arrangements that have died out if there was a freeze that was hard enough to cause a die-off of vegetation. And in the same manner, in our residential areas, we have an abundance of people who garden, and which is great because gardeners are carrying on the life essence of the bees and the hummingbirds and all of the different things that fly through to take advantage of the flowering of those plants. You guys understand, right? With me, the ones who are listening, you're a wildlife fan, you're a nature fan. You understand that in order for the insects to survive, there needs to be a food for the insects. And the insects typically will eat things that we, as people, kind of take for granted. Like, for an example, if I were to let a weed grow wild in my backyard, as tall as it can grow, some of them will outgrow me. And the flowers that are on them will be filled with insects coming around looking for that nourishment that they can only get from the native vegetation that emerges as these springtime temperatures come about. So that's what I did. Last year, I let the entire backyard grow wild, and I only added to it things that would flower and fruit in ways that were beneficial to wildlife. So there was sage, there were tomatoes, there were cantaloupe, there were eggplant, and all of these plants produced flowers which insects came to feast on. Now, as I walk through this park that I'm about to walk through, I'm going to be taking pictures and or video of what it is that I see. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to share that in this same clip to multitask. The reason I'm putting these clips together in this way is because I know that somewhere out there, you are paying attention and you are sharing this video because you understand you're not the only one, and I'm not the only one who are talking about these things, but the observations that are being brought forth in ways that maybe are not including the actual current events of the situation that is challenging us today. So, thank you so much for watching this channel. Thank you for understanding what we're talking about and hearing me out and going on these journeys with me. What I'm trying to do seems pretty impossible. Even today, I was talking with a loved one, and the person who I was communicating with, and I should say I was texting with, the person who I was communicating with talked about how, well, back when I started visiting Big Bend, myself in 1993, back then the visitation wasn't as much. So it's probably the increase in visitation that has caused such a challenge to the wildlife around. Now, I would go so far as to boldly disagree with that insight, because if you guys don't remember, just a couple of years ago, there was a ceasefire of visitation to these parks because of the COVID outbreak. And so these parks were left wild as could be, without any visitation inside of those entire ecosystems. And during that time frame, all of the wildlife could have rebounded pretty quickly. But the reason it is not rebounding, if you ask someone like me or anyone else who's keen, who's an observer of these situations, they will consistently point out in every instance, well, where are the insects? Don't get me wrong, there are insects and there are emergences here and there. But where are the insects, for an example, that used to be there when I go even to this place I'm headed to hike the wilderness area in the temperatures of the 70s on a blue day with a super beautiful sun shining to warm things up? Where are the insects that would be swarming me at some point if I were sweaty and standing still on the trail? Where are the things that would be buzzing as I was recording that you would hear in the microphone of the camera? These things are not occurring the way they used to occur, and only some people are paying attention to it and relaying it in a way that seems sensible. And by sensible, what I mean is in a way that we can communicate openly. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong, or I'm the only one who's right. The only thing I'm going to say is these are my observations. I encourage you, as a fan of wildlife and nature, to observe these things for yourself. Even and especially if you live in the same areas or can visit the same places that I do, show me the type of things that you're finding that show you that there's an abundance of insect activity that's there to sustain all of the wildlife that typically would show up on a regular basis. In some areas, there is an abundance of wildlife, and people are afraid to share that information because now you bring in even more visitors. The world that we're in is so unusual because we don't know how to communicate effectively in a way where we could share relevant news just like this quickly and efficiently. And in a lot of cases, that's because most of our media is brought to us and paid for by sponsored advertisers. And it's just a self-serving circumstance. So the only way to really tune in to what's really going on is to tune out of this kind of content across the board. Even my own content. If you are concerned with wildlife and you understand what I'm talking about and you want to raise awareness, get out into wildlife. Get out into wildlife and start paying attention to it. In some cases, when we don't care enough to pay attention to something, like let's say for an example, a sick parent may care for their child more than they care for themselves. But at a certain point, let's say the sick parent is so sick that they cannot pay attention to their child. Then at that point, basically we have a decline in the likelihood of survival for that child, or at least survival in a comfortable way that seems to be whatever the standard of comfort might be. And we know globally that there is not a shared standard of comfort. And because we know this, we can also observe everything around us and say, wow, I have absolutely taken quite a share of comfort from Mother Earth. You know, how can I recognize Mother Earth if I'm just taking from and never really paying attention to that which is around me? So, like I say, in this particular case, a lot of people might say that it's challenging to hear everything that's being said here because the topic is too broad. The topic is outlandish. The topic is something that, well, the population has increased. The topic is such that people will say, well, it's the wrong season. And all of these excuses are things that people like myself don't want to hear anymore. Excuses are for what? Everyone's got one and they all what? Excuses are like what? Anyway, there's a saying that people have here. It's kind of funny. I heard it in a corporate meeting one time. Anyway, all of these excuses are things that just seem to make us less productive. Once we stop sharing excuses and once we start sharing solutions, true solutions, which are first becoming aware of the fact that there's a problem at all, and then what do we do with these problems type solutions, when we start doing that, we're going to have a magnificent chance of remedying the situation. Until that point in time, it makes no difference who everyone votes for. There is no way we're making it out of this in one easy piece. With peace. We're not going to make it out with peace. It's going to be challenging. So, the reason this channel talks about all of this, includes spirituality and faith plus action, is because there's so many conversations that have been shorted, that I've been shorted, and I want my due, and I think that you guys do also. I'm tired of being shorted by the people who will not communicate with me because they say, well, that's a conspiracy, and the conspiracy theorists say things like this and that, or, well, it's because, well, the visitation wasn't as great in 1993, or, well, until we vote someone in, we won't be able to have these changes. It's an excuse. The very first thing that we need to do is to stop pretending that someone else is doing this work because they're not, and start looking at what it is that we need to work on around us. In most cases, the very first thing that we can work on is ourselves. If I'm the first person that's telling you this and sharing it in a way where you can understand, well, thank God. I used my voice and I showed that there was a choice. anyone can do this. Once the channels start talking about these things in a way where we don't base what we're saying on whether or not it was sponsored, whether or not someone would advertise for us, whether or not the commercials that were shown during that clip were nutritious or delicious, we would base it on the right thing is the right thing. Peace is peace. And if you don't understand that, and if you want to continue to hamper peace, well, prepare to be overwhelmed with the power of light and love and forgiveness. Forgiveness, driving past a cemetery right now, by the way. Forgiveness is something we can actively choose to do before we give up the ghost. If we don't give up the ghost in a way that seems settled, I wonder what's going to happen afterwards. I really don't know. What I do know is that it feels a heck of a lot more amazing to be grateful for the things that are occurring around us. Even as I pass by the same field where there's trash strewn about the trees, the dead tree, the dormant trees, I should say, strewn about the dormant trees, where, I mean, it's right by a cemetery. Do the families even care for those grave sites anymore? Should we be sticking people in the ground with embalming fluid in them? Should we be spending on all these elaborate ritualistic ways of practicing certain habits? Or should we at least for once consider, instead of just referencing our fathers, should we at least for once consider what our children have to say? I'm not sure. I'm not the boss of you. You're not the boss of me. Thankfully, we all have a higher power to answer to. And so in that particular way, we fill our roles. We encounter one another as it was necessary. And as some people say, people in some cases were just around for a season. There was a reason they were there for a season. I tend to think in a longer term plan, which includes time frames as long as and up to eternity and beyond. And my system is such that I know I don't have all the answers. Collectively, we've got every bit of knowledge and perseverance to make it through in some of those areas where things are persisting on a small basis, to make it through where others are failing. And that's just the way it has to be. For the things that are failing, well, maybe that was because it was the old way, and maybe the old way needs to simply just give up the ghost. Maybe the new way is to be compassionate and to be considerate and to actually share where sharing is due, and not to be sharing things that give us the false illusion that we belong to something that is a higher power than the higher power. Those are just my thoughts. On this channel, on the Jeep Journals, this journey has taken me across the nation in different ways where I never ever could have expected that I would have these opportunities that I've had. And because of that, here, I'm going to see what happens when I park here instead. And because of that, you and I are communicating right now on this channel, because something in this segment, something in this on this journey, which I shared, that had something to do with wildlife, nature, wellness, conservation, something resonated with you. And the reason it resonated with you is because it would resonate with me as well. I'm talking as if I'm talking to someone who is being challenged by understanding that there's something unusual going on in nature, And someone out there who is ready to accept that challenge to actually pay attention would be willing to hear what I'm saying because they like me as a person for some reason. And then they would also be able to take that knowledge and go and look for themselves. And once people start to look for themselves at what's going on, and once they start to see for themselves that there is quite a change, quite a decline in the number of insects, once they start to sound the communication that's necessary, it will no longer be them and us. It'll be all of us. There is no they. Right now, the only roadblock to this interpretation is that some things are sponsored and advertised and shared among people who have hope and desire, and that's you. If I were watching this, I would say, man, this guy, he seems pretty passionate about what he's saying. And not only that, but I watched his clip where he walked the entire South Rim in sandals. He just basically got up, drove over there, spent the night driving through this whole ecosystem carefully, walked throughout the whole ecosystem without taking a bunch of packaged rubbish to add to the already seemingly insurmountable mountain of rubbish, and made it back to his hometown all within a span of, well, about 30 hours or so. I'm guesstimating. I could be off one way or another, but I literally left San Antonio at 10:30 at night, got to Big Bend where I was going to start my hike at about 6 in the morning, walked the entire South Rim in sandals, got back to my car at literally at 4:20 p.m., and then basically drove down to the basin to Panther Junction to mail some postcards, make some phone calls. And then I drove out to the Dog Canyon area, made a few more phone calls while I caught the magnificent sunset. Here you guys are seeing the sun behind some beautiful clouds. And whatever else I saw during this walk. So if you're seeing a bunch of rubbish, I'm not trying to trash this world that we're living in. I'm telling you, it's already trashed. I'm not trying to cause panic. The panic's already occurred. We're all in that boat together, right? You can see where people are panicked. You can see the agitation. You can in fact, you yourself might feel agitated. You might feel anxious. But you can absolutely overcome the anxiety by looking inwardly, tending to yourself, and becoming healthy in your own space. Once you become healthy in your own space, you bring health about you naturally. That's the way everything works. If the nucleus of a family, let's say it was the grandparents in the prior year, is no longer there, if they gave up the ghost and they're in that cemetery where nobody is tending to all the trash around it, if the nucleus fell apart and there were no people who were at the grandparental level who would say, we need to go and collectively clean up that area. That's our families, our family members, the remains are out there. We need to clean that up. If people are not taking that action, then they will not see the decline in insects that are out there in the wild. They will not understand, hey, maybe we need to temporarily change some of the practices. They may not be able to pass that information on to their children. They may not be able to share this information in their nucleus of family because there is no nucleus of family at some points, and we may be at some kind of a tipping point where someone is giving someone else a tip that, hey, we can tend to ourselves and then heal the world around us. That's really the only way to overcome anxiety. And you saw, I effortlessly drove here without hardly even a worry about the traffic that was going on around me. You saw me arrive here. You saw all of the graphics that I showed you, whether it was a lot of nature or plastic. Again, I can't tell you what I'm going to see. And I don't want to narrow the possibility by saying I'm only seeing trash and plastic either, because when we believe in let's say that we believe we want to drive a certain kind of vehicle, once we key in on that item, we're going to want to see, we're not going to want to, we're going to see that vehicle everywhere. We're going to see that vehicle driving everywhere. Oh, that's that car that I really like. The same way, if we do not perceive wildlife when we walk around, we may never see it because we won't be looking for it. I perceive and long to see wildlife. That's my main objective. If you have not gotten that from this channel, again, I apologize for somehow miscommunicating that with you. And if you did get that, you get extra points. You get the opportunity to click the thumbs up. You get extra points to be able to add something to the description telling me what you see in your neck of the woods. And quite frankly, you get a new friend, a friend you didn't know you had. And if you share this, we can grow our group of friends, nourish one another in ways that helps us to achieve those levels of growth that we're capable of. And we share the love. That's really what it comes down to. Some people don't understand it. Like I say, I've put it in all kinds of crazy words, and you might already be tuning out, but you might be hearing this and going, God, for a half hour, I've spent this time here listening to this person, and they're so passionate about what they're saying, and I'm amped up. I'm jazzed about Mother Nature, and I want to sing a song about it. And I love this guy's songs and the way that he tells the story. The poems are great. I love that he makes jewelry out of things from nature. I love that he says when he went to the ocean, he put his hands in the ocean and prayed to God, asking for a sign, for something that I could wear myself. I love that he said that. And I did. I went to the ocean and I prayed for pieces of jewelry to make so that we could learn to stop producing new things and start using what we got. Use it or lose it, right? And if we're not using the world the way that we've got it right now, we're certainly going to lose it. That's just my interpretation. There are a lot of gurus. There's this one sad guru on these shows that I absolutely enjoy watching. And I like it because the way that he presents the information is so refreshing. It's soothing the way he talks. It's dynamic the way the responses are given. It's made for deep thinkers just like ourselves. In fact, that sad guru talked to another cat down the road who I also watch a lot. And that cat down the road is living the life, man. They're selling all kinds of accessories to sustain that level of living. And that's great. We all are doing something, but are we all generating new stuff to make that money that we're making? Or are we just sharing the energy in a way that is sustainable and maintainable? For most of us who have a collection of books, guitars, artwork, etc., some of that stuff is not being admired the same way that it would if it was the rarest of the rare. And some of us don't give credit to the fact that you and I are also the rarest of the rare, because we won't exist again in this format. So it behooves us to pay attention to those rare occurrences. And all of what I'm showing to you in this video hopefully will demonstrate what a rare occurrence is versus what a common occurrence is, especially if you look at the last segments. And if you backtrack enough, again, I don't want you to get too wrapped up into this and try to spend all day, for years studying this stuff. Study in your own backyard. You don't need to go to a website to read stories about someone who's telling you. Once you know, you know. And I guess that's my own downfall, because once someone knows enough to tune out, they don't need to hear my information anymore. Maybe some people are giving just enough information to keep people reliant on them so that they can keep buying the flavored entertainment items. in order to participate in a consumer market, when the consumerism is the part that we need to remove from the equation. And I don't mean that we shouldn't make money or pay the corporations that have the amazing benefits for the people that take advantage of these things for maybe some exceeding amount of years sometimes, just to live a certain lifestyle. What I'm saying is, if we are not maintaining those lifestyles that we have indebted ourselves to, then maybe it's time to give up those overages. And then we would find out, hey, we're in balance again. We're in balance enough to where we can actually help one another out. Until we do that, we need to help ourselves out. To help ourselves out, we need to let go of some of the things that are excessive. Some of that excess, for an example, takes the form of weight. And some of that weight happens to cause inflammation throughout the body, which causes so many other side effects that we feel sick, and it becomes a cycle. It's a repeating, repetitive cycle. So in some of the ways that I've talked in the past, I've showcased over and over, there are items that we can get from our local markets right now to reduce the number of packaging items, the number of packaging items that are strewn about these areas. And that's just the first step. Once we are able to achieve those levels of mentality, then we start looking at, well, there are a lot of bottle caps all over these trails. What can I use them for? I saw someone melting plastic bottle caps from the bottles of water and making insulation that goes over soldered wires. So when you solder the wires, basically they were melting a plastic cap over the soldered wires, which is brilliant because it's basically an insulator, and it achieves exactly what it is that you would expect it to achieve. Now imagine making a little customized gun out of it, a little like a hot glue gun that did the same thing, where it clamps around and basically solders the strips. This person was using like a lighter or something to heat it up and melt it onto the wires. But imagine a new soldering gun that was made of plastic composite from the plastic that we found to recycle as it was. Just something that was poured in molds and made into the casings that go onto the items that are going to be necessary to help reduce the overage of items that we find literally all over the ground. Literally. It's all over. And that's the only reason why, again, I don't want to theorize what we saw during this video, but if you're not seeing a whole lot of wildlife, it's because on this 72-degree day and climbing, for some reason, there wasn't a whole lot of wildlife to be seen. And trust me, if anyone is going to see wildlife and hang out with it and have a beautiful time with it, it's me. There's nobody who I know at all who gets to hang out with wildlife the way that I do it, except for one old cat who is a great friend of mine who can out-hike most people, who has stories that were very similar to my own. The only difference is with me, at this end at this point in the trajectory of what wildlife is now versus what it was in 1993. We've had a lot of foot traffic and a lot of people and a lot of different things that have challenged wildlife, so it's even more difficult for me to typically just go and see these things than it was for this other person to go and see those things 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, or even 70 years ago. This person got to see an entire transition. For me, I grew up here in San Antonio, and at my earliest age, I can remember seeing blind snakes and roadrunners on a street right next to downtown San Antonio. And as time went by, of course, the increase in traffic and, of course, the increase in all of the pesticides and anything that went into the equation has absolutely slowed down some of those opportunities to see a real wild live roadrunner or blind snake near the downtown area of San Antonio. It's not impossible. It still can happen, and it still does happen on occasion, but it's a lot less likely that we will find that wildlife thriving the way it was even when I was a child just 30, 40 years ago. So again, welcome back to this channel. I know some of you are returning subscribers who are watching these videos, who understand what I'm talking about. And also welcome to this channel for those of you who are just now seeing the concepts that we're discussing here. Please type in the description, type in the comments what it is that you're seeing or not seeing. We need to call out awareness to these situations in order to overcome the difficulties that we're encountering. If we continue to avoid discussing the situation, if we continue to avoid talking about this as a truth, then we continue to forego thinking about it and taking real action towards these challenges that we are all collectively experiencing. So if you're a relative who is sharing my content, thank you so much. I absolutely appreciate it. If you're a friend who is sponsoring me one way or another, I absolutely appreciate it. Thank you so much. If you can just share the video, that would be doubly meaningful to probably the people who you know, who I don't know currently, so that we can actually communicate together across the channels. I can't do any of this without your help, and it's possible you can't do any of what you're after without my help. I know that we are a network of people helping one another. I know that we have the opportunity to make things better, and I know that I'm naming a specific obstacle in a very passionate way here, in a way that seems to go on and on about the same thing. And I know that that can be something that a lot of people who are impatient might not have the time to listen to, even for 1 minute, let alone 42 minutes. And then there are some people who spend the entire hour watching this video because it follows a trajectory, and the things that happen while I'm talking about these stories are oftentimes miraculous. The things that I'm able to see and demonstrate in real time, just based on observational awareness, seem mysterious. And also, the things that I'm able to do in just a pair of sandals without carrying a backpack with a bunch of water and snacks in it seems to be marvelous. I think if I saw someone just walking to the same places I was backpacking to with a heavy pack that had all these different things on it, and if I saw that person just walk right by, smiling, feeling light as a feather, without stumbling on the trail over the weight of that collapsing backpack that's collapsing my back, if I saw someone doing that, I think I would be inspired. And so in a lot of ways, whether or not I saw someone doing that, having done it myself, I've been inspired. I've been inspired to think about, well, how did the Native Americans do this? You know, they didn't carry all of these different things with them. They just basically used the resources around them as they became necessary, if that was something that had to happen. And in fact, I even did that. I hiked in Alaska in that same way, where I didn't take any water or food with me on a 10-mile hike. And somewhere at the midway point, when I became pretty hungry, I found a wild blueberry bush, and there were wild raspberry bushes. So I got to have blueberries, raspberries, and all of that was right there on the trail. Fresh as could be, the best I'd ever tasted, better than the ones that I got that have been delivered to me in this city at the local grocery store inside of a bin. I'm not turning them down and saying those are bad items or that the bins are negligent or any of that. What I'm saying is, nothing beats absolute fresh from the source content. So if you're watching this information and this is the first time you're hearing this thought, I hope that this is the freshest, purest from the source content that you've experienced so far. I hope that you find someone else that also has fresh content in your neck of the woods. And I hope that I'm able to speak with that person at some point so that we can share our variations and our observations to help to grow something that's more nourishing for the end user. So, which is you and I. So if we're showcasing content that the media is not showcasing, and if we don't have help from one another, we might all fail together. That's just a basic observation. And the basic observation I'm giving is because I believe there's a decrease in wildlife, so much so that my general conversation about this topic is not taken lightly. This is all something that I'm saying absolutely seriously, that we must collectively acknowledge and participate in to restore balance, to restore the fact that we are stewards of these things to which we are entrusted. If there is someone in the mix who is burning the house down, or who is hiding information or misleading people, that's basically obfuscation, and anyone who is aware can see past, I'm going to use a terrible word here, can see past the bullshittery. When people bullshit one another, well, you got to be pretty good to bullshit a bullshitter. Usually it's like that saying I was going to say earlier that I held off on because it would have curse words that sometimes get into people's mind as, oh, this can't watch this. This would never fly in church. The truth is, if I were in church right now having this discussion, I would have to backtrack and say that funny saying that I've heard in many places about excuses. Excuses are like assholes. Everyone has one and they all stink. So this is a saying, and it's a funny saying because in some contexts, like let's say if you worked at a factory laboring place, someone might say that even as a manager to their employee who is given an excuse. If you were to hear something like that in church, you might hear a lot of gasps of shock. I can't believe they said that word. How is it that word would not be translatable into something else? How is it that we couldn't say, well, if someone's lying, they're giving incorrect nuggets of information, bullshit? And how also would it be more properly represented in a beneficial way to say, hey, the bullshit's necessary. That fertilizer in there causes the growth of other things that might have the spores that set free the knowledge that just, boom, transforms the world. And it's that simple for one person who's passionate enough to transform the world to actually use their voice to say that which is occurring around them. And it's also very interesting to see how many people who, when you ask them to share something like this, would go, oh yeah, this is way out there. It's conspiracies. I saw too much trash on there. Your attitude is one way. Those are projections. Whenever someone finds a reason to tune you out, that's a projection of why they don't want to accept something in their own self. I can watch this cat down the road. I can watch the gurus who are sad. I absolutely know that I would be able to communicate with these individuals. I know that I can communicate with them. And I also know that we are all imperfect beings. It doesn't matter how perfect we think we are. We have room for improvement. And in some cases, we're forgetting to include the thought processes which allow for all life to actually matter. How much does that child matter to a parent when the parent would go sick to help their own child to make it through to the next level? How much passion is there when the trout swim all the way upstream only to have trout die-offs after the fertilization of the eggs at the top of the stream? How is it that these things happen in nature naturally, and only those with free will, i.e., human beings, can be so stubborn to not share that which brings us joy and positivity. Sharing is caring. Some people like to share things that say, buy this, buy that, and never acknowledge that even those items that seem sustainable come in packaging that oftentimes has plastic-based solutions that are also conveniently affixed to the already marked up consumer-based approach to this exchange of goods, to this exchange of positive energy from Mother Nature with one another. There's a middle person. That middle person is getting rich quick. They've already been rich. They're able to close the circuit of advertisement so that you can see one type of media over and over. And also in such a way that if you shared this other person's content who doesn't really conform, you might even lose friends and fans of your social page. But the flip side to that is you've given up some of the fake ghosting that would have occurred later on, and you gave it up faster than having to wait until the end to find out that that person was just going to ghost you anyway. So with all of the resources that I've been entrusted to, I've apparently been here to showcase nature, how nature is nurture. I'm showing you a journey where my health went in one direction for a while, and then it went in another direction for a while, and then it's going to go in another direction again. Some of those were constructed based on social conformity. In order to be accepted and approved of in many circumstances, I needed to participate in the system a certain way. In so doing, I have found my own levels of addiction, and I've also described them and discussed why it is that I believe I can overcome addiction and why anyone else can also overcome addiction if they only try. In order to overcome addiction, the first thing we have to do is to become aware that there's something to be concerned about to begin with. In this nation, in this era, on this walk, can you tell me if it looked as if I were showcasing syringes, melted spoons? Was I showcasing drug paraphernalia on this video? What images did you see? Could those be considered links to an addiction? Do we have an addiction to convenience-based products that our corporate consumer markets have brought to us, oftentimes advertised during the sponsored shows that we watch over and over and over until we think that that's a normalized lifestyle? What is a normalized lifestyle to you? Does it include plastics for every single possibility that we need a solution to? It might. Maybe those plastics that are on the ground are resources that we can start cleaning up to both beautify that which is around us, including the graveyards of our fathers and mothers, and to put to use those resources that are literally flying through the air on a breezy day. And as we pick up these items that will not just break down into nature and cause plastic particulates to further poison the system, as we do that, perhaps nature will have a fighting chance to recover faster. You hear the wind breezing? Easier and with more dignity than simply going to its own grave without even being able to tend to itself or its children, which would be us. Mother Nature. We're all nature. We all have the same mother. It's only up to us to recognize whether or not we would acknowledge our mothers enough to reach out for and hold them when they needed our support. Mother Nature can definitely use our support, in my basic observation. I hope that these videos provide some kind of passion to you and not just disappointment. I hope that you see that we're talking about a serious topic that needed to be talked about, discussed, and in addition to the faith part, we needed to take action, right? I might have faith that we can vote things into a different direction, and I can take actions to ensure that our dollars, the things that we consider energy for some reason, even though health is absolute wealth, the healthier I am, the more wealthy I become. Healthier I am, the less I need to rely on any of the systems that are being bought and sold to us to try and entertain us. Because what's entertaining to me, like I said, it's nature. I've been watching the clouds and the sun and watching the temperature dip down when we get into the cloud cover and feeling the sun radiate all over me when the clouds are no longer obscuring the sun. And I've felt the super hot temperatures that the sun is throwing down and the cold temperatures. And if I were an insect or a plant, if I were a plant, I'd probably easily enjoy this part of the year because it's like it gets hot, it's still cool. Oh man, I can flourish in this. If I were an insect, I might need some of that flower power to power myself. And if there were no flowers to eat on, I might have some difficulties even getting moving and motivated to move. And if I were anything else that persisted based on any of the nutritional levels from the ground up, and if there were no insects, and if there were no flowers because of these up and down temperatures, and if there were no cactus fruit because the last freeze, the last winter here in Texas killed off a huge percentage of cactus, if there were no cactus fruits that would sustain me in my time of need, maybe I myself would also disappear with the base layer of insects and plant life that used to support me in the past. Maybe in the same way on these types of channels, if some people do not receive those levels of attention, which is why I'm not giving that attention on a place like Facebook, if some people don't receive those levels of attention, maybe they will also decrease in their ability to produce poisons. Maybe in this instance, maybe on all of our social medias, what we need to do is look at only the producers who are sharing content that is of true value. And I don't mean like the hardware store. What I mean is true value, like this is what's going on here. This is a picture of my, niece, nephew, grandchild, child, mother, father, whatever, the plant that I was growing. Maybe if we inspire one another with those kittens and puppy dogs and also share things that say, hey, this is what's going on. This is real news. This is really happening. There's nobody that's paying me to say the things that I'm saying, for an example. I'm saying what I'm seeing and I'm showing you what I'm seeing. And maybe if we share real news, maybe we start to grow something different on a channel like Facebook. Right now, though, it seems like the only thing we're growing is a reinforced, complex, not so complex addiction to consumeristic habits and the foods that are sold to keep all of that purchasing happening. And maybe it's about time to give up that ghost, that illusion, and to look inwardly and to share something that actually made a difference, which would be probably sharing your time with one another in a real life conversation with the people who you actually know have your back. So for the people that have my back, I know they would walk into nature with me at any point in time to see these crazy things that I'm showing. And I'm so blessed to have received that level of clarity. And I'm really happy to be passionate about what I'm passionate about, even though I'm seeing a nature die-off right in front of my own eyes. And even though I'm also looking forward to the springtime abundance, and that even though I will show all of these things rebounding, it's still sad when you see something dying that you love, you know. For anyone who's had a pet for a long term, that gave a pet a forever home, for anyone who's had first goldfish, a grandparent who's passed away, for anyone who's had a friend or relative of any stature to have passed away, I think we all know what loss is. And, you know, in some cases we can look at the trees, and if you have a favorite tree or a favorite animal that's no longer present on a regular basis, maybe these things are things that we can not only perceive, but also discuss, and again, have insights that'll help us to rebuild that which is being destroyed by our unaware actions. Once we become aware and start doing things with a level of awareness, I'm pretty certain that we will no longer take off bottle caps and errantly have them fall off in any case, whether it's a windy day or what have you. We might even go so far as to leave those bottles in our pack until we get to a point where we're on a level surface where we have no wind, so that we don't have the possibility of losing that cap or the camera lens or any of the equipment that we walk up into these places with. Maybe at some point we'll even start carrying things out and doing it without disgust, because it's a resource that we can appreciate and use lovingly. And maybe as we start to think in terms of love, maybe we won't be ghosting one another anymore either during this process where we're trying to figure out how in the world do we do this together with one another, the people who we love. How do we do this with people, the strangers who we don't even know that we love yet? How do we do this? First thing is communicate. Communication is key. Action is basically the door that we're opening, and we can either step through that door of action or it's just a show. Hopefully this isn't just a show to you. Hopefully this is real life, and you're paying attention just the same way that anyone else who's aware is. And hopefully you have a great day. Thank you so much. Until next time, thanks for joining us on the jeepjournals.com and here on this page. Thank you for riding along on this journey. And till next time, peace, love, and all that old school stuff.